turn it over to distinguished Chairman Marco Rubio.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for filling in. As you know, the Senate's involved in one big issue on the healthcare issue, and it delayed us here a little bit while we were involved in a conversation. So I thank you for starting it and for taking over, and all of you for being here this afternoon. Hearing is entitled "Gagging the Lawyers: China's Crackdown on Human Rights Lawyers and Its Implications for U.S.-China Relations." We'll only have one panel testify today. It's going to feature Terrence Halliday, who's the co-director of the Center on Law and Globalization at the American Bar Foundation, and also the co-author of Sita Liu, co-author with Sita Liu of the book "Criminal Defense in China: The Politics of Lawyers at Work." Tung Biyao, a Chinese human rights lawyer. He's a visiting scholar at the Institute for Advanced Studies and co-founder of the Open Constitution Initiative and China Human Rights Accountability Center. Sha Cheng-yu, who's son of imprisoned human rights lawyer Sha Lin and a student at Liberty University, and Li Xiaorong, who's an independent scholar, formerly with the Institute for Philosophy and Public Policy at the University of Maryland. We thank you all for being here. Before we move to the topic at hand, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the news this week regarding the reported transfer of 2010 Nobel Peace Prize laureate Liu Xiaobo from prison to a hospital for treatment for late-stage liver cancer. This should not be confused with an act of mercy on the part of the Chinese government. His 8 years of imprisonment due to his eloquent appeals for nonviolent political reform and protection of human rights remains a travesty of justice and a stain on China's human rights record. Dr. Liu's medical parole is not the equivalent of an early release from his prison sentence, or that he has the freedom to meet with his wife, Liu Xiya, and other family members and friends. I've urged the President to seek the humanitarian transfer of Dr. Liu and his wife to the U.S. to explore what medical options may be available. I'd also like to briefly read a quote from an editorial that ran in the Communist Party-controlled Global Times. The writer gloated, quote, "China has not collapsed as the West forecast in the 1980s and 90s, but has created a global economic miracle. A group of pro-democracy activists and dissidents lost a bet and ruined their lives. Although Liu was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, he is likely to face tragedy in the end," end quote. What a grotesque expression in this Communist Party-controlled publication. Any notion that Dr. Liu will receive adequate medical care under the supervision of his captors is simply absurd. I was pleased to read this morning that the newly arrived U.S. Ambassador, Terry Branstad, has urged the Chinese government to allow Dr. Liu to seek treatment overseas. As the Nobel Committee noted, Dr. Liu exemplifies the long and nonviolent struggle for human rights in China. That same spirit animates the work of the Chinese rights lawyers we will hear about today. July 9th, 2017 marks the 2-year anniversary of the start of what has been described as an unprecedented nationwide crackdown on human rights lawyers and legal advocates in China, an event that's come to be known as the 709 crackdown. While perhaps unprecedented in scale and coordination, nearly 300 rights advocates were detained, summoned for questioning, or disappeared. The crackdown began much earlier. Xi Jinping's rule has been marked by extensive campaigns to silence political dissent, curtail civil society, and ensure ideological loyalty to and conformity with the Chinese Communist Party. No sector of society is untouched. Business leaders, bloggers, social media users, university professors, journalists, religious adherents have all been targeted. But China's rights defenders and lawyers have been the tip of the spear for even longer. As our second witness, Dr. Tung Biyao, can no doubt attest. This small but tenacious group is closely linked to the growth in legal rights consciousness among ordinary Chinese citizens. China's rights defense movement converged around the incidents of injustice that resulted from the single-minded drive of the Chinese government and the Communist Party for rapid economic growth without political reform. The victims of injustice included farmers who lost land from government expropriation, urban residents forcibly evicted without fair compensation, migrant workers trying to recoup unpaid wages, teachers, laid-off workers, and Army veterans who lost their pensions, and parents whose children were made ill from ingesting contaminated milk powder. The movement has expanded to support free speech, the pro-democracy aspirations of Hong Kongers, ethnic minority rights, and other issues. Our first witness, Dr. Halliday, has conducted literally hundreds of interviews with these men and women, a group bound together by their shared conviction regarding the importance of protecting basic legal freedoms in a system where rule of law remains aspirational at best. Among the lawyers featured in his latest book are those whose names and stories have captured headlines for the last 2 years. Their unjust and unexpected detentions nearly 2 years ago was, for many, the start of a long and harrowing ordeal marked by months in isolation, torture, coerced confessions, and other forms of mistreatment. Some of these lawyers, like Zhang Tianyong, whose wife I had the privilege of meeting earlier this year, remain in detention. Others, like Li Huping, are no longer in captivity, but the brutality they experienced left them visibly physically altered. Many have been disbarred and will never practice law in China again, and still others live under constant surveillance and harassment. It is tempting, in the face of China's worsening and increasingly brazen human rights violations, to grow disheartened, which is why I think it is equally important to spend some time today examining another part of this crackdown that is unprecedented, and that is the response of some of the family members of those detained. By their own telling, many of the wives of these rights lawyers had not previously been involved in their husbands' efforts to pursue justice and accountability from their government, but as the present system conspired against them and their families, they became advocates in their own right. In case after case, these women took up the mantle of advocacy on behalf of their husbands. Their personal accounts of intimidation and harassment, of landlords refusing them housing, of children denied entry into local schools, of movement restricted and lives lived under constant surveillance, coupled with their compelling public defense of their husband's innocence, has, in the words of Dr. Halliday, opened up a, quote, new line of struggle that we have not seen before in China, end quote. Similar courage and boldness is on display today with the testimony of Sha Changyu about his father's plight. Even for those of us who hold steadfastly to the view that the United States foreign policy must be infused with the principled defense of human rights and the promotion of basic freedoms, there remains the notion that change in China will ultimately come from within, and I agree. And China's rights defense lawyers are at the vanguard in pressing for systematic change, in seeking accountability and redress, and in working towards a day when China is a nation where the law is used to protect rights, not to suppress them. It is our duty to stand with them in this monumental task, and it is our honor to welcome all of you here today. And we'll begin with the testimony of Mr. Halliday. Thank you for being here. This is a general question for the whole panel. If you speak to people involved in setting policy in the new administration, their argument is they do want to raise human rights issues, but they believe they're best raised one-on-one in private meetings in an effort to allow the Chinese Communist Party officials to save face, in essence, to not be embarrassed publicly, that they respond better to a private one-on-one setting as opposed to public denunciations of the kind that we're conducting here today. The flip side of it is, I know that one of the arguments oppressors make, not just in China, but all over the world, to the oppressed is nobody cares about you. Everyone's forgotten about you. You might as well give up because you know, you're just not important enough, and you know, the United States is not going to break or harm their relations with us because of your case. What is your view on, number one, the idea that somehow human rights are best raised with the Chinese officials privately versus the sort of more open, more open highlighting of these cases for the world to see? And second, is what we do here, irrespective of the administration, is what we do here, whether it's on this commission, on the Senate floor, on the House floor, in our letters, in our resolutions, does it matter? Does it make a difference? I certainly know they read it in the Chinese government because I know they get upset about it. But what about to the activists and to those who, what impact does it have? Because it's important for our colleagues sometimes to understand the impact that what we do here is not simply symbolic, and if it is, I'd want to know that too, obviously. So two separate questions. Is there the view of the private versus public? And second, what about our role here in Congress, and when we have meetings on this commission or make statements or do resolutions, does that have an impact? Does that matter? And if you want to go first, Mr. Halliday.
I cannot say what kind of efficacy there is in private interventions, but it is a very common point made by the Chinese government and by others that such relationships should be private. However, in my empirical research and the work of our team, speaking to many activist lawyers over a period of time, there is absolutely no doubt in their mind that China must be spoken to publicly and China must be publicly shamed. And at this moment, from our long-standing research, I have no doubt that when the world speaks, out loud and publicly, China listens. China has a very thin skin. When the American Bar Association awarded its International Human Rights Prize to Wang Yu, within 48 hours, the Global Times had an editorial trying to rebut that move. That tells me that not only was China listening, but China felt it had to respond. And finally, the point that you made, Mr. Chairman, is that in our interviews with notable activists, time and again, they have said that when there is public calling for their release or public calling for news about them, their treatment is improved. They can perceptibly point to the day or the week or the month when their treatment changes, when the international community has turned the spotlight publicly on their plight.
Yeah, I think both private and public pressure dialogues are useful, but I think this kind of pressure should not be only lip service. It should be giving real pressure to Chinese government, and should be follow up and. So you should send a clear message to Chinese government that this human rights issue or a list of political prisoners or one certain case, really matters, and it should have negative consequence if you don't respect your own constitution or the international human rights standard. And when I was detained and tortured, the United States is my important hope. So if United States refuses to pay attention to Chinese freedom and human rights, and the people in the prison, the people in custody, will be very, very hopeless. Yeah. Thank you.
I think the both private and public way is needed, because for the private part, I think for the individual cases like Chen Guangchen, we can the American government can talk to a Chinese government personally to save those individual and specific cases. And for the public, those are for the underprivileged people who is under threatened. So I think the private work should work for the lawyers and the human rights defenders who is already persecuted, and the public ways working for the underprivileged people to protect them in the future. And I think that the Congress is definitely working. It's not just our voice being heard, but for example, I went to the Chinese embassy with my petition and my signatures, but as a Chinese legal citizen, nobody would even see me. But I can talk through here, and the Congress has the power to talk with the White House, and the White House has the power to summon the Chinese ambassador to respond to my petition. So I definitely think the Congress is doing some work. Thank you very much.
I think it's just a matter of accountability. Whatever is privately said, nobody knows who is going to hold people accountable, both the Chinese officials and the U.S. officials. We don't know what was promised, what was raised, and how can you hold anybody accountable if nothing happens afterwards. And the other issue is the information imbalance. In China, there's already so much secrecy. Secret detention, secret interrogation, disappearances, and now they just revised the government public information disclosure law, make it practically no information would be disclosed. So we already don't know so many things, and we are, going to advocate further secrecy in human rights discussions. I think we're not on a playing field. when we're talking about U.S. officials meeting with Chinese officials. So I think abusers of human rights are mostly afraid of the sunshine. They're afraid of information. They're afraid of people knowing what they did, and afraid of knowing being asked to change their behaviors.
In the past, when we have interacted with rights activists and others in China, a number of them have told us that they have experienced both some level of harassment, even when here in the United States, even on Capitol Hill, actually, and by those working on behalf of the oppressors. But more importantly, the sort of implied threat that they could reach them anywhere in the world, that if they had to reach out and affect their lives in some way, they could do it, that they really weren't safe anywhere, that these sort of threats. I just wanted to ask, because all of you have been so vocal and open on some of these issues, have any of you, if you're comfortable sharing, obviously, ever felt, as if you have been the subject of that sort of implied or direct threat of intimidation, either here while present in the continental United States, even perhaps because of your appearance here today? And if you're not comfortable saying, then obviously that's an answer too.
I would like to share some of my experience. After my father was arrested, he was completely missing. We didn't receive any warrant, and so we do not know where they took them or who took them. That's one of the pressure we got, and the police also summoned my mom to ask her to divorce with my father, and I was on the threatened list to my mom. That's the reason why my family sent me here to keep me safe. But I think at the first 2 years, I was threatened by the government, and I kept silence. And
I apologize. To be clear, your first 2 years while you were still in China,
oh,
or
no,
while you were
I'm
here?
Here, yeah,
And
my
what-
first 2 years here.
How were you threatened?
I just because for example the lawyer Wang Yu, his family members just took it away by the secret agents in the airport, and also the police officers went to my family friends and other family members to threaten them, and me and my mom kind of get isolated. So I'm just worrying about everything, and I was scared. I just kept silence here, but I've learned what is right to do and what is justice, I would say. So the pressure turned to my power, and I would have a chance to speak here.
So to be clear, while you were here already how long have you been here now?
2 years.
In the 2 years that you've been here, there were times where you chose, at least initially, to be careful what you said or spoke out for fear of retribution against friends and or loved ones in China?
Uh-huh. Yeah, so basically it went to my mom, and I was scared. Yeah. Cuz when the police officer broke in my house, I was there. I saw everything, and honestly, my family didn't share with me with all the political stuff when I was a child, so I was scared badly.
I have a lot of stories that my friends, including Chen Guangcheng and some activists in the United States, were intimidated by Chinese government when they are here. Even including some activists were attacked physically when they were in a protest. I myself, when I was in
attacked physically here in the United States?
in California, by some unidentified person, and obviously they are hurt by Chinese government or Chinese embassy. And when I was in Boston, Harvard Law School, my wife and one of my daughters were banned from going to the United States. So we were separated for nearly 1 year. Obviously, the purpose of their travel ban is to silence me. And my last winter, my wife was fired by the company she was working for because of the clear pressure from the Chinese government. So they use all kinds of the collective punishment to marginalize, to silence, to intimidate the human rights activists in the United States.
I just have one follow-up question on that, and that is, for example, about 2 weeks ago, we saw the nation of Panama break its relations with Taiwan for purposes of appeasing a position that China had exerted influence. I've had cities in my home state come to me and ask for us to open the way for Chinese consulates, but of course the price of opening a Chinese consulate in a city is the closure of a Taiwanese one. So we know that these efforts that you've described in terms of pressure diplomatically, they also exert on nations outside that context and even here domestically. And I was just curious whether anyone here had an experience here in the United States where you were either not allowed to speak or disinvited at a university and to a business, at a media outlet, anywhere, where you felt that perhaps your voice, that your potential hosts were dissuaded from giving you an opportunity to participate because of pressure from China here in the United States.
So I have 2 examples that my scheduled speech were canceled by universities in the United States.
Which ones? Which universities?
One is Harvard.
Harvard.
Yeah.
Why did they tell you they canceled the speech?
I think 2 years ago, when the president of Harvard was visiting China, and Chen Guangcheng and I were going to give a speech at Harvard, and they canceled it. So, I think last time when I was here, I was giving a testimony about my own book that was canceled by ABA, American Bar Association. So they invited me to write a book, and I signed the agreement. But they later rescinded the proposal, saying that publishing my book will endanger their programs in China. So
the American Bar Association, which represents lawyers and therefore defenders of justice, canceled the publication of a book that they invited you to write because they were afraid it endangered their programs in China.
Yes.
But we did write a letter on that regard. But I want people to hear that so that they understand that this is not something happening halfway around the world. They're doing it to people and organizations in the United States with, I imagine, the threat of being unable to participate in activities in China. There are either economic or other repercussions. Is there any other? Do you have another one, or those are the 2 that come to mind? You said there were 2 universities. Do you remember what the second one was?
No, just I can't. So there are some other examples that they try to invite me, but because I'm sensitive, I'm going to talk about human rights, politics, and they refuse to invite me. And a lot of experience that when I was giving a talk in the university, the other department, like Chinese department or Confucius Institute, they refused to forward the posters, and they told their students not to come to my my presentation.
Did someone else have someone to add? Anyone else have a similar experience that they could share? Well, do you have any further questions?
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I thank you all for being here. I know at varying degrees, but across the board, it takes some level of real courage. We've heard not just about the threats of cancellation, but the real risk to family. And you know, we're blessed to live in this republic where oftentimes the worst things that happens is, you know, somebody says something really mean about us on Twitter. And these hearings are a good reminder that, that in many parts of the world, including the most populous nation on earth, the consequences of speaking out or dissent are significantly higher. And I think it speaks to the essence of who we want to be as a nation and as a people. Is America simply a geographic territory, or is it also an idea? And if we're an idea, then, and that idea is that we believe all human beings are entitled to rights that are given to them at birth by their creator, and government's job is to protect them, not to deny those rights, not to decide them, and certainly not to deny them. And we seek not to impose our point of view on the world. It's not, some people would disagree with that statement, but I'm not, and nor do we seek to contain China. China is an ancient, revered culture with thousands of years of contribution to mankind. Some of the greatest inventions and innovations in human history came from China. It is a nation with an incredible history, and I believe an incredible future. I welcome China's rise in many ways. I don't welcome a totalitarian state's rise. I do welcome China's rise because I believe its people have the opportunity to contribute. And we seek partnership with the people of China to solve. Just think about the problems in the world today. If somehow there was a Chinese government that cared about the rights of all mankind, combined with could work together with us, I think we'd be a lot further along on some of the major issues confronting this country. But when you don't care about the rights of your own people, why would you care about the rights of anybody else? And that's our problem with the Chinese Communist Party and its leadership, not its people. And I'll remain hopeful that that will change. But in the interim, we'll continue hopefully to speak on behalf of those who agree with us, but don't have the opportunity to express it openly in the nation of their birth. So we are just grateful to all of you for being here, for your time, for your testimony, for your contribution. We look forward to sharing your testimony with our colleagues and continue to address these issues time and again. And with that,